In a world where the heavens are ruled by ancient scales and flickering embers, your worth is decided the moment. In the kingdom of Hua Jin, destiny isn't something you forge, it's something that is etched into your skin. It is called the Dragon Crest.
For some, it is a mark of fire, granting them the power to incinerate armies.
For others, it is a mark of frost, allowing them to freeze time itself. But for Han So-jin, 16 came and went with nothing but a haunting silence. No glow, no heat, no power, just fair, unblemished skin that marked him as the greatest failure in the history of the Ardent Dragon Academy. Welcome back, everyone! Today, we are diving into an epic tale of a boy who was trampled by the world, only to be chosen by a force that the world had forgotten to fear. This is the story of a hidden legacy, a forbidden bond, and a power that defies the laws of magic. This is the story of how the weakest student became the sovereign of the void. The Ardent Dragon Academy is a place of breathtaking beauty and suffocating cruelty. Built atop the jagged peaks of the Dragonback Mountains, it is where the elite of Hua Jin learn to master their bonded beasts. Here, status is everything. If you have a high-tier crest, you are royalty. If you have a low-tier crest, you are a servant. And if you are Han So-jin, the boy without a mark, you are less than a ghost. You are a punchline! Se-jin's daily life was a cycle of endurance. He was intelligent, yes. He studied the ancient texts while others were out flaunting their flames. He understood the theory of mana circulation better than the instructors, but in a world that values raw, draconic strength, his knowledge was seen as a pathetic coping mechanism. Look at him! The whispers would follow him through the obsidian hallways. The scholar of nothing. Still looking for a dragon in those books, So-jin? Maybe if you read fast enough, a lizard will feel sorry for you. The ringleader of this tournament was Kang Do-hyun, the heir to the legendary Crimson Flame clan. Do-hyun was everything So-yun was not. He was loud, arrogant, and possessed a crest that burned with the intensity of a dying sun. To Do-hyun, So-jin wasn't just a classmate. He was an insult to the Academy's prestige. He would often use Seo-jin as target practice, letting small sparks of dragonfire singe the edges of Seo-jin's robes, laughing as the crestless freak scrambled to put them out. Standing on the opposite side of the social spectrum was Yu Nari, the top student of the academy. She was bonded to a majestic ice dragon. She didn't participate in the bullying. She simply looked through Seo-jin as if he were made of glass. To her, Seo-jin wasn't worth the effort of an insult. He was a statistical anomaly, a mistake of nature that would soon be filtered out by the harsh reality of the world. But Seo-jin carried a secret. Deep within his soul, buried beneath layers of ancestral trauma and forgotten history, lay something the Academy's testing stones could never detect. He felt it in his dreams, a cold, vast emptiness that hummed with a melody older than the kingdom itself. He called it the void, and it was the only thing that kept him standing when the weight of the world tried to crush him. The turning point arrived during the annual dragon calling ceremony. This was the most sacred event of the year, held in the Plaza of the Ancients, where dozens of massive dragon statues stood guard. These weren't just carvings, they were anchors for the spirits of dragons looking for a host. One by one, the 16-year-olds would step forward, offer a drop of blood, and pray for a response.
The ceremony was a spectacle of light. One student called for the wind dragon, causing a cyclone to swirl around the plaza.
Another summoned a stone dragon, making the very earth tremble. Then it was Seojin's turn.
The atmosphere shifted the moment he stepped onto the dais. The laughter from the student body was deafening. Kang Do-hyun shouted from the front row, "Hey, Sorjin, don't trip on your way up. We wouldn't want you to bleed on the floor for nothing." Even the teachers looked away, pitying the boy who was about to be publicly rejected by the heavens for the 3rd year in a row. Seojin ignored them. He walked to the center of the plaza, his face a mask of calm resilience. He reached the oldest, most weathered statue in the circle, a dragon so ancient that its features had been worn smooth by time.
It was a dragon without a name, a relic that hadn't responded to a call in over 3,000 years.
Sojin pricked his finger and pressed it against the cold stone. Silence. A second passed, then 5, then 10. The crowd erupted into cheers.
Give it up! Go home, Crestless!
But then the wind stopped. Not just the wind, the very air seemed to freeze. A shadow, darker than any night, began to bleed out from the base of the nameless statue.
A sound like grinding mountains echoed through the plaza. Cracks, glowing with a faint ultraviolet light, spiderwebbed across the ancient stone.
The students fell silent. The teachers stood up, their faces pale. Suddenly, the head of the statue shattered, and where there should have been stone, a massive, terrifyingly real black eye opened.
It wasn't fire, it wasn't ice, and it wasn't light. It was a void, a bottomless pit of pure primordial energy.
The entire academy felt the pressure. Students fell to their knees, their own dragons whimpering in their souls. Only Sojin remained standing. He looked directly into that abyss of an eye, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone.
A voice, ancient and weathered like the birth of the stars, vibrated not in his ears, but in the very marrow of his bones.
Finally, I have found you! In an explosion of dark energy, the statue crumbled into dust, and a shockwave sent the spectators flying. When the dust settled, the plaza was in ruins. The teachers rushed forward, weapons drawn, expecting a monster. But all they found was Seojin, standing in the center of the crater, looking dazed. The academy elders scrambled to examine him. They checked his arms, his chest, his neck. They used every detection spell in their arsenal. "Nothing," the headmaster whispered, his voice trembling with confusion. "There is no crest, no mana signature. The statue is gone, but he has received no power." Kang Do-hyun let out a shaky laugh, trying to mask his terror. He broke the statue. The freak is so useless, he even managed to break a 3,000-year-old relic. "He's not a dragon rider, he's a jinx!" The mockery returned, harsher than before, fueled by the students' fear of the unknown. They called him a breaker, a curse, and a hollow vessel. They assumed the ancient dragon had looked at him and chosen to self-destruct rather than bond with someone so weak. But that night, as Seojin lay in his small, damp dorm room, the shadows in the corner of the room began to writhe. His hand began to burn, not with the searing heat of Do-hyun's fire, but with a cold, numbing sensation. He looked down and gasped. A single obsidian scale had embedded itself into the back of his hand.
It didn't glow, it absorbed the light around it. The voice returned, clearer now, echoing from the scale.
"Do not listen to the chirping of insects, little sovereign," the dragon whispered. "They seek power that is given." "You shall seek power that is earned. The world has forgotten my name, and they have forgotten the price of the void."
"We shall remind them together." So Jin felt a surge of energy, not the wild, uncontrollable mana of his peers, but a focused, razor-sharp intent.
The void dragon seal had finally awakened, but it wasn't a gift. It was a key. A key to a path that would take him into the darkest depths of the Academy's secrets.
The voice instructed him to leave his room. Guided by a phantom pull in his chest, Seo Jin navigated the silent halls of the Academy, avoiding the moonlight. He found himself standing before a heavy iron door in the basement, hidden behind a tattered tapestry of the kingdom's founding. This was the entrance to the Trial of the Forgotten Cave, a place forbidden to all students, rumored to be a graveyard for those who failed the dragons. "Power must be earned," Seo Jin repeated to himself, his voice steady for the first time in years. He pushed the door open, stepping into a darkness that felt like home. Little did he know, he wasn't just entering a cave. He was entering the first stage of a war that had been brewing for 3 millennia, a war between the dragons who were remembered and the one dragon the world tried so hard to forget. The boy without a crest was gone. In his place, something else was beginning to stir, and the Ardent Dragon Academy was not prepared for the shadow that was about to swallow its flames. The darkness of the forgotten cave didn't just absorb the light, it seemed to consume the very concept of sound. As Han So-jin descended deeper into the bowels of the academy, the mocking laughter of his peers felt like a distant, fading echo from another life. Here, beneath the polished marble floors of the Ardent Dragon Academy, lay a truth that had been buried under 3,000 years of propaganda and lies. The voice in his head grew louder, not a shout, but a resonant hum that vibrated in his marrow. "To the left, little spark! The stones that glow blue are a trap. They react to the mana of the dragons you have been taught to worship." "But you have nothing! Walk where they cannot!" Seo Jin realized then that his greatest weakness was now his only shield. Because he possessed no visible dragon crest and no conventional mana, the ancient security seals of the sanctuary didn't even recognize him as a living being. He was a ghost in the machine. He navigated through a corridor of obsidian spikes that would have impaled a fire dragon contractor instantly. He solved riddles etched in a language that predated the kingdom of Huajian, puzzles that required logic, not the brute force the academy preached. At the heart of the sanctuary, the air shimmered with a violet hue. There, resting upon a pedestal of shattered dragon scales, was the crystal egg. It didn't pulse with heat or cold. It pulsed with a rhythmic pull, like a black hole's heartbeat. As Seo Jin reached out, his hand trembling, the black scale on his palm burned. When his skin touched the crystal surface, the egg didn't hatch. It dissolved. Liquid starlight flowed into his veins. This was the dragon's heart, not a physical organ, but a concentrated essence of the void. It was the memory of a dragon that had given everything to save a world that eventually chose to forget it. The following morning, Seo Jin returned to the surface. He looked the same tired eyes, the same plain uniform, but his posture had shifted. He no longer hunched his shoulders to avoid notice. He walked with the heavy grace of a predator that knew exactly where the exits were. In the academy library, he was cornered by Professor Baek Jin-woo. The man's eyes, usually sharp and analytical, were clouded with a strange mix of fear and reverence.
"You found it, didn't you?" Beck whispered, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "The relic of the Nameless One."
"Why was he erased, Professor?" Seo-jin asked, his voice calmer than it had ever been.
Beck sighed, a sound of ancient exhaustion. The great catastrophe 3 millennia ago, it wasn't stopped by the gods or the current Dragon Kings.
It was stopped by him, but the price of his victory was a power so absolute it terrified the other dragons. They feared the void more than they feared the apocalypse, so they struck a deal.
They would rebuild the world, but only if every record of his existence, his name, his sacrifices, his very soul was purged from history. They turned a savior into a ghost.
Beck gripped Sojin's shoulder. The Crimson Flame clan, the Ice Dragon lineage, their entire status is built on a lie. If you reveal who you are before you are ready, they won't just mock you, Seo-jin. They will execute you.
But the secret was becoming harder to keep. Kang Do-hyun, the arrogant heir of the Crimson Flame clan, had grown tired of Sojin's unearned stoicism.
To Do-hyun, Sojin was a stain on the Academy's reputation, a reminder that not everyone was born noble. The challenge was issued in the central courtyard, surrounded by hundreds of students. "A duel, loser," Do-hyun sneered, his hands already wreathed in roaring orange flames. "If I win, you leave the Academy forever."
No more piteous stares, no more pretending you belong.
Yunari, the Ice Dragon's prodigy, watched from the balcony. Her eyes were narrowed, tracking Sojin's movements. She expected him to cower. Instead, she saw him step into the dueling ring with nothing but his bare hands. "He's suicidal," one student laughed. "Do-hyun is going to turn him into ash," another added. The duel began with a literal explosion. Do-hyun unleashed a fire serpent strike, a torrent of flame that turned the paving stones red hot. The crowd gasped as the fire engulfed the spot where Sojin stood. But as the smoke cleared, the laughter died in 1,000 throats. Seo-jin hadn't moved. He hadn't even been touched. The Void Dragon's first gift wasn't destruction. It was perception. To Seo-jin, the world had slowed down. He could see the friction in the air, the way the mana gathered before an attack, the infinitesimal gaps in Do-hyun's perfect technique. Do-hyun screamed in rage, launching a flurry of fireballs. Seo-jin moved like a shadow, not fast, but efficient. He stepped 2 inches to the left, and a blast hissed past his ear. He ducked, and a scythe of flame cut the air above him. It looked like he was dancing through a storm without getting wet. "Fight me!" Do-hyun roared, charging forward with a fist encased in a miniature sun. Seo-jin didn't strike back with fire or ice. He simply reached out and touched Do-hyun's wrist at the exact moment the mana was meant to discharge. With a tiny flick of the Void Dragon's influence, he didn't counter the energy, he erased the direction of it. The explosion happened internally. Do-hyun's own mana backfired, sending him sprawling across the courtyard, his flames extinguished as if someone had sucked the oxygen out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. The top student of the academy had been defeated by a boy who hadn't even cast a single spell. "I didn't see a crest,"
Nari whispered from the balcony, her breath hitching. "I didn't see any magic at all. What is he?" But the victory brought a dark tide. In the days following the duel, the atmosphere of the academy changed from mockery to paranoia. Ancient dragon relics began to vanish from the high vaults. Students who had been vocal in their bullying of Seojin started to go missing, only for their clothes to be found near the forbidden cave. Whispers turned into accusations.
"He's using dark arts," the students hissed. "He's a cursed being who stole the power of the cave."
The evidence was being planted with surgical precision. A stolen relic was found under Seojin's bunk. A witness claimed to see him talking to a shadow in the middle of the night. Even Nari, who had begun to feel a flicker of respect for his resilience, found herself pulling away. The weakest student was now the primary suspect. That night, as Sojin sat in his cold cell, the black scale on his hand throbbed. The nameless dragon's voice was no longer a hum. It was a growl of recognition. "The wolves are no longer hiding in the forest, little Spark. They are wearing the robes of your teachers. They are the ones who stole the relics. They are the ones who want to finish what the Dragon King started 3,000 years ago." Seojin looked up as a shadow fell across his cell door. It wasn't a guard. It was a figure in a mask, bearing the emblem of the Black Eclipse. But beneath the mask, Seojin recognized the mana signature, the familiar, steady flow of someone he was supposed to trust. The academy was a trap. The history was a lie. And as the first rift of gravity began to tear at the edges of his cell, Seojin realized he was no longer just a student. He was the only thing standing between the world and the return of a darkness that even the dragons feared to name. "The enemy wears a teacher's face," Sojin whispered to the empty air. "And I think it's time I showed them what happens when you try to extinguish the void." The iron bars of the high-security detention wing didn't just melt, they folded. Under the immense pressure of the first Void Dragon art, the very atoms of the reinforced steel seemed to forget their purpose, collapsing into a dense, marble-sized sphere of scrap metal that clattered onto the stone floor. Seojin stepped out of the darkness of his cell, his eyes no longer their usual dull brown. Instead, a swirling vortex of obsidian and violet flickered within his pupils. The Void Dragon seal on his chest, once an invisible burden, was now pulsing with a rhythmic low-frequency hum that vibrated in the marrow of his bones. "You've been holding back, haven't you?" A voice echoed from the end of the corridor. Seojin looked up to see Yunari. Her ice dragon's aura was flared to its limit, frost creeping across the walls and floor as she struggled to breathe in the heavy, pressurized air surrounding Seojin. Behind her stood Kang Do-hyun, his usual arrogant smirk replaced by a mask of pale, sweating confusion. His fire dragon, usually a roaring inferno, was whimpering, a psychic resonance that only a contractor could feel. "Nari, get back," Sojin said, his voice sounding layered as if two people were speaking at once. "The academy isn't what you think it is." The disappearances, the stolen relics, they weren't the work of a rogue student. They were a harvest. "A harvest for what?" Nari demanded, her hands trembling as she notched an arrow of pure glacial energy. "The principal says you're the one who opened the gates for the Black Eclipse. He says you're the vessel for the Calamity Dragon." Seonjin took a step forward, The floor tiles beneath his feet cracked from the sheer weight of his presence.
The principal is the one who wrote the textbooks, Nari. He's the one who told you which dragons were heroes and which were monsters.
Have you ever wondered why there are no records of the Great War from 3,000 years ago? Why every statue of the nameless dragon has its face chiseled off?
Before she could answer, the ceiling of the detention wing exploded. Shadows poured through the rupture like liquid ink. These weren't students or guards. They were the dragon hunters of the Black Eclipse, warriors clad in armor forged from the scales of slaughtered drakes. They carried dragon suppressor harpoons, weapons designed to sever the spiritual link between a human and their guardian. Target acquired, the lead hunter hissed, pointing a jagged blade at Seojin, the Void Bearer. Kill the girl and the Fire Clan brat. Capture the boy alive.
The master requires the heart of Astrax.
The battle that followed was the first time the Ardent Dragon Academy saw the true nature of the weakest student. Do-yen let out a primal scream, summoning a pillar of crimson flame, but the Black Eclipse hunters simply deflected it with shields treated in dragon blood oil. They moved with a clinical, terrifying efficiency. Nari fired a volley of ice spears, but a hunter lunged through the air, his harpoon glowing with a sickly green light, aimed directly at her heart.
Gravity rift, Seojin whispered.
He didn't move. He didn't even raise a hand. He simply willed the space around Nari to change. In a heartbeat, the hunter was no longer flying toward her. The air around him became 10,000 times heavier. The ground beneath him didn't just break, it imploded. The hunter was slammed into the stone with such force that his armor shattered instantly, pinned to the earth by a localized gravitational field that defied every law of physics. The other hunters froze. They had spent their lives training to fight fire, ice, wind, and lightning. They had no counter for the void.
Power must be earned, the nameless dragon whispered in Seojin's mind, its voice a low growl that felt like a mountain shifting.
And you, little spark, have earned the right to see the truth.
Suddenly, the world around them shifted. The walls of the academy didn't fall, they dissolved. Professor Baek Jinwoo appeared from the shadows of a nearby pillar, his eyes glowing with an ancient golden light.
He wasn't holding a weapon, he was holding an ancient leather-bound compass that pointed toward the sky.
The seal is broken, Sojin, Beck said, his voice urgent. The principal has begun the ritual of ascension in the upper sanctum. He's sacrificing the captured dragons to fuel a portal to the lost kingdom. If he reaches the throne of Astrax before you, he won't just control the dragons, he'll erase the very concept of free will from this world.
Professor? Nari gasped, looking between her mentor and Sojin. You're part of this? I am a guardian of the unspoken history, Nari replied. And right now, your weak classmate is the only reason the world hasn't turned to ash. Beck slammed his staff into the ground, and a shimmering portal of starlight tore open in the middle of the corridor. Go! The floating kingdom of Ethereia awaits. It is the birthplace of the dragons and the place where Astrax's memories are buried. Find the truth, Seojin. Only the truth can kill a god. Sojin didn't hesitate. He grabbed Nari's hand, not as a savior, but as a partner. He looked at Do-hyun, who was still staring at the crater where the hunter had been crushed. You coming, Fireboy? Or are you gonna stay here and wait for the monsters to finish the job? Do-hyun gritted his teeth, his pride wounded, but his spirit ignited. I'm not letting a crestless loser get all the glory.
The three of them plunged into the portal, leaving the burning academy behind. They emerged into a world that shouldn't exist. Above them was not a blue sky, but a swirling nebula of violet and gold. They stood on a floating continent made of white marble and fossilized dragon bone. Massive spires reached toward the stars, and in the distance, a colossal crystalline egg sat atop a throne of obsidian. This was Ethereia, the lost dragon kingdom, but it wasn't empty. Thousands of ghost-like apparitions of dragons circled the spires, their cries a haunting melody of loss and betrayal. As Seojin walked forward, the phantoms began to bow. They didn't bow to him. They bowed to the shadow of the great wings that began to manifest behind him. This is where it happened. The dragon Astrax spoke, its voice now clear and resonant. 3,000 years ago, the humans didn't fear the darkness. They feared the balance. I was the void, the one who ensures that what begins must also end. They wanted eternal life, eternal power. So they tried to kill the end itself. Seojin felt a surge of memories that weren't his. He saw the first principal of the academy, the ancestor of the man who now ruled it. He saw the betrayal, how the other dragon contractors turned on Astrax, the dragon who had saved them from the great catastrophe, because they were afraid of his ability to nullify their powers. They hadn't just forgotten him, they had systematically erased him from every book, every song, and every prayer.
Seojin, look! Nari pointed toward the obsidian throne.
There, standing before the crystal egg, was the principal. He was no longer the dignified old man they knew. His skin was translucent, glowing with the stolen spirits of dozens of dragons. He held a sacrificial dagger over the egg, the heart of Astrax.
You're late, boy, the principal smiled, his voice sounding like cracking glass.
I've spent 40 years preparing this. I've manipulated the wars, the curriculum, and the very bloodlines of the great clans just to bring this moment to fruition. With the heart of the void, I will rewrite the laws of the universe. There will be no more weak or strong. There will only be me.
You speak of balance, Seojin said, his voice cold as the vacuum of space, but you're just a thief in a fancy robe.
The principal laughed, and with a flick of his wrist, he summoned the spirits of a dozen dragons to strike them down. A thief? No, I am the new architect, and you are just the final ingredient. As the battle for the fate of history began in the floating ruins of a forgotten god, Seojin realized that his journey wasn't about becoming the strongest. It was about becoming the anchor. The void wasn't about destruction, it was about the space where new things could begin. And as the first strike of the final war landed, the black scale on Seojin's hand began to spread, covering his arm in indestructible, midnight-colored armor.
Astrax, Seojin whispered. Let's show him what happens when the forgotten remember.
The air crackled with the scent of ozone and ancient magic as the Academy's great hall transformed from a place of learning into a battlefield of gods. Director Han, the man everyone had looked up to as the pillar of the Ardent Dragon Academy, stood atop the central spire, his eyes glowing with a malevolent, stolen radiance. He wasn't just a principal, he was the architect of 1,000 years of lies. You think a name can save you, boy?
the principal roared, his voice layered with the screams of 1,000 trapped dragon souls.
I have consumed the essence of the Fire Kings and the Ice Queens. Your void is nothing but an empty grave.
But Seojin didn't flinch. For the first time in his life, the whispers in his head weren't a curse. They were a choir. As the black eclipse forces swarmed the academy grounds, the students who once mocked Seojin were now falling back in terror. Kang Do-yeon, the arrogant heir of the Crimson Flame, found his fire extinguished by the shadows of the principal's puppets. Yunari, her ice dragon gasping for air in the suffocating atmosphere, looked up at the spire. She saw a figure she once considered a glitch in the system, standing alone against the darkness. "Seijin," she whispered, her breath hitching. Seijin's arm was no longer human. The midnight-colored scales of Astrax surged with a rhythmic pulsing light, the heartbeat of a forgotten era. "The void isn't the end, Astrax," Seojin spoke, his voice carrying through the chaos like a calm bell. "It's the beginning." At that moment, the first void dragon art was unleashed, Gravity Rift. The ground didn't just shake, it ceased to exist. Around Seojin, the laws of physics buckled. The Black Eclipse soldiers who were mid-charge found themselves pinned to the earth by a weight 10 times that of the planet. The principal's stolen energy began to leak, pulled toward the singularity growing in Sojin's palm. "What is this?" the principal screamed, struggling to keep his form. "I am the master of dragons." "No," Seojin replied, his eyes turning into endless pools of starlight. "You are a thief, and a thief can never lead a king." With a roar that tore through the dimensions, Astrax manifested, not as a physical beast, but as a colossal shadow that eclipsed the entire academy. The nameless dragon was nameless no more. Astrax, the dragon of the beginning and the end, had returned. The battle was a symphony of destruction and rebirth. Every time the principal struck with stolen fire or ice, the void simply swallowed it. Seojin moved like a ghost, his intelligence finally matching the raw power of a god. He didn't just fight, he calculated. He saw the weak points in the principal's stolen armor, the places where the dragon souls were crying out for release. In one final, blinding flash, Seojin lunged. He didn't use a sword. He used his hand, the one carrying the void seal. He reached into the principal's chest, not to kill, but to liberate. "Go back," Seojin commanded. "Go back to the cycle." The stolen souls erupted from the principal in a pillar of white light, shattering the Black Eclipse's hold on the academy. The principal, now a mere shell of a man, withered into dust, his ambition consumed by the very void he tried to control. As the dust settled, silence reclaimed the Ardent Dragon Academy. The floating ruins of the ancient kingdom began to descend, merging with the academy grounds. Professor Bake walked through the wreckage, his eyes misty as he looked at Sojin. "You did it, boy. You didn't just win a duel. You restored the balance of the world!" Nadi and Do-yen approached him slowly. The hierarchy of the academy was gone. There was no strongest or weakest anymore, only survivors of a new age. Do-hyun looked at his hands, then at Sojin, and gave a stiff, respectful nod. He didn't need to say it. The rivalry was over. Sojin was beyond rivals now, but the victory felt different for Sojin.
He looked at his hand where the black scales were receding, leaving only a faint, elegant mark of a dragon.
Is it over?
Neri asked, standing beside him as the sun began to rise over the horizon. No, Sojin said, looking up at the sky. The eggs are waking up. Across the kingdom of Huajin and across the entire world, ancient, dormant dragon eggs that had been stoned for millennia began to crack. The return of Asterix had signaled the return of the true Dragon Age. The era of humans controlling dragons was ending. The era of humans and dragons walking as equals was beginning. However, far across the great ocean, on the dark continent of Draconia, a different kind of power was stirring. In a throne room made of obsidian and bone, a figure cloaked in shifting shadows sat watching a pool of blood-red water. In the reflection, he saw Seojin standing amidst the ruins of the academy. The figure let out a low, chilling chuckle that made the walls tremble.
So, Astrax has finally awakened, the figure mused, his voice like grinding stones. The anchor has been set. The prophecy is moving forward.
He stood up, his height towering over the guards, dragons of immense size that knelt in absolute terror.
The boy thinks he has brought peace, the figure continued, a cruel smile spreading across his face.
He has only opened the door for us. Prepare the 12 dragon emperors. We have waited 3,000 years to reclaim what is ours.
Let the weakest enjoy his little victory while he still has a world to protect. The screen fades to black as the roar of 12 different terrifying dragons echoes in the distance. And that, everyone, is the end of Han Sojin's journey, or should I say, just the beginning of his legend. From the boy without a crest to the sovereign of the void, Seojin has proven that your worth isn't determined by what others see, but by the strength of your own heart and the choices you make when no one believes in you. But the 12 dragon emperors are coming. Can Seojin and Astrax stand against the true rulers of the old world? Or was the principle just a small taste of the darkness waiting in the shadows? If you enjoyed this epic journey through the Ardent Dragon Academy, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring more of these incredible stories to life. Let us know in the comments below. What would you do if a legendary dragon chose you? And who was your favorite character in the series? Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the start of Season 2. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Stay legendary!